the first legal tie and the first legally recognized person having the greatest authority to speak on behalf of this dead person because they have died unspoken of or unspoken for because they have no will. When we're talking about an intestate person, will be their last legal spouse. Now,
I like that word, last legal spouse, because sometimes you marry twice, sometimes you marry 3 times.
And we have seen that.
And the other thing too, we have to bear in mind, if the person was in a, what we like to call in Trinidad, a common law relationship, that person may also be their last legal person, but we will get into common law, how that person becomes. So all we're trying to do now is to determine who is the nearest next of kin to the deceased person. And the easiest, and of course it's quite a totem pole, but for ease of reference, we are sticking with spouse and children for the time being.
Right. So now, Ms. Joseph, where this totem pole, because you know this webinar, the purpose of it is really to encourage members of the public to understand that the laws are for them and that they can find it and they can avail themselves with the legislation, especially legislation that affect their lives and their social rights like family. So what legislation dictates this totem pole? Is there anywhere that someone who has a loved one who just died, for the purpose of clarity, can go and find, well, who is entitled to apply for this grant, and what is, where do I fall? What
on the ladder? All right. There are 2 pieces of legislation. The main one being the Administration of Estates Act. And for persons who are in common law relationships, the Distribution of Estates Act will cover them. So essentially 2 pieces of legislation.
What about the Succession Act?
Right. The Succession Act deals primarily with the logistics, the mechanics of will making. How do I make a will? What do I put in a will? When is a will valid? When is a will invalid? All of the elements, pillars of will making will be found in the Succession Act. So yes, there is some crossover, but since we're talking about distribution of estate, who gets what a deceased person left, then we are dealing primarily with Administration of Estates Act and Distribution of Estates Act.
Beautiful. So we want you guys to check that out. Remember that the Freedom of Information Act has made it possible for you to have access to these pieces of legislation. They are available online and they are your property and your constitutional right for access as members of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So you can Google it and find these pieces of legislation, avail yourselves with them. Remember, it is the duty and responsibility of an attorney at law only to interpret law and bring it to the court. However, reading of law, knowledge of law, and education of law is your right. There is no issue with you availing yourself with the legal information. Of course, don't go to your attorney feeling that you're a lawyer, but educate yourself so you can know what you're supposed to do. So we spoke of the Administration of Estates Act, and then we also spoke of the
distribution,
right, of Estates Act as well as the Succession Act. So those acts or pieces of legislation outline who can apply. So in the instance where there is an establishment, and good evening to all of those saying good evening, Dennis, and good evening, Denise.
Hi, good evening.
And everyone else, remember, feel free to talk in the chat, ask your questions as we go along, because this is for you. We already know the information. We need to know what you don't know to steer the conversation, all right? So, Ms. Joseph, we're talking now about, the last legal spouse.
Right.
And this may seem simple enough, But what are some of the complications or
Right.
instances?
Well, you know how much I love family law. So
Yes.
I'm happy. But I'm happy. I'm glad with what you said, the last legal spouse. So the first point we want to make there is the person is the legal spouse. Married under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be the Muslim Marriage Act, the Hindu Marriage Act, the Orisha Marriage Act, or the other General Marriage Act. Right? And because if you're a Muslim and you are wife number 2 or number 3, you will not be registered as the last legal, because in Trinidad and Tobago, we only recognize the first marriage, one woman married to one man. Now, you may also be a wife that you are separated from your spouse. You are not divorced, but you are separated. You're just living apart from your spouse. Right. You are still considered the last legal wife. However, during the time that you have been separate from your spouse, he may have been or she may have been in what we call a common law relationship. So therefore, then what is happening there, you could die leaving a legal spouse and a common law spouse and children as well.
Trinidad.
And attorney to help unravel that for you. And we have many, many, many instances like that. So if anybody is concerned, you don't have to tell us you're in a common law relationship. You can just say you heard about this one. We don't have to know it's you. And we can help you unravel how you go forward.
Right.
So last legal spouse, but these are the implications, complications of last legal spouse.
Let me ask about that, because I remember distinctively a matter where, and this was my mom's case, yeah, where there was a last legal spouse. They were in the process of divorce. They had the divorce. They had the decree 𝗨𝗱𝗲𝗀𝗀. Did not yet obtain the decree absolute, and he would have been in a common law relationship spanning some 20 years. Can a legally married man or woman be declared also a common law spouse to someone else?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Once you are not married to the person you are living with, and what we in Trinidad and Tobago call you are living together as husband and wife in a bona fide domestic relationship.
But you are legally married. No, hear my question.
That is correct. That is correct. Else. A married man or a married woman can also have a common law spouse, because this is what happens. Yes. I am married to Mr. White. Yes. But we've had some differences. We like to say, use the American terminology, irreconcilable differences. Right. But I have not divorced my spouse.
Right.
I've gone back to live somewhere else. I've gone to rent an apartment somewhere. I fall in love with another gentleman and I begin a relationship with that person, but I'm still legally married. So I have a legal spouse, but I also have a common law spouse. And the law also provides for that. That's why we have the Distribution of Estates Act to deal with common law situations.
So in a case like that, where the deceased died in 2 relationships, where he or she left a legal widow and a legal common law spouse, what does the legislation say about that?
All right. So in the first place, the legal wife has a marriage certificate. Yes? So she's the legal wife. The common law spouse, before the courts can deem her legal common law spouse, the first thing she has to do, or he, within 28 days of the death of their common law relationship, they have to file what we call a notification of interest. So the first thing the common law spouse has to do is to inform the court, here, I exist, right? And that is within 28 days in the midst of your bereavement. Right. Within 28 days, you inform the court that you exist. And then you have the it can take a while, a year plus, process where you ask the court to declare you a cohabitant. The legal spouse has a marriage certificate. So you are definitely wife or definitely husband.
Right.
The common law person, the court has to now deem you such because you were just living with this person, and there are certain categories of information, circumstances that you have to meet for the court to declare you. So if you do all of that and you are declared a common law spouse, the legal spouse is entitled, as always, to 50%. However, the common law spouse is entitled to only what she or he acquired with the deceased during the life of the deceased.